Hi everyone, welcome to the Sound Mind podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of music psychology. I'm your host, Sophia, and as a music psychologist, I'll be guiding you through everything you've ever wondered about music. So whether you're a music lover or just interested in the science of sound, you're in the right place. Now, as we know over here, music has this incredible power. It can lift us up, calm us down, and even heal us. But sometimes it actually does the opposite. Sometimes a song comes on and instead of comfort, it brings pain, a flood of memories, or emotions that we weren't expecting. And these are what psychologists call trigger songs. Tracks that are tied to difficult experiences like heartbreak, loss, trauma, or other emotional moments in our lives. And they're not just sad songs, they're actually songs that carry a memory, context, or a feeling that's so strong that hearing them can actually really hurt. So today I want to dive into the psychology of trigger songs. Why do certain songs have this power over us? What exactly is happening in our brains when music hurts? And perhaps most importantly, how can we cope with these songs or even reclaim them? So by the end of the episode, you'll have a deeper understanding of why music can both heal and hurt, and maybe even some tools to navigate your own soundtrack of difficult memories. So without further ado, let's get into it. So music isn't just sound, it's a powerful emotional trigger that can reach deep into our memory, identity, and even our sense of self. So when we talk about trigger songs, we're really talking about the intersection of music, memory, and emotion. A space where the brain's wiring makes certain songs almost impossible to hear without feeling something, sometimes intensely and unexpectedly. And these songs don't just remind us of a memory, they can actually make us relive it with all the associated emotion, physiological response, and even bodily tension that came with that moment. And one of the key reasons that trigger songs hurt is how music is processed in the brain. So listening to music isn't passive. It actually activates multiple neural systems all at once. And this is something that I talk about a lot over here on the Sound Mind. But starting off with the amygdala, the brain's emotional center. Now, this responds super strongly to emotionally charged music, whether that emotion is joy, sadness, nostalgia, or fear. And at the same time, the hippocampus, which is critical for forming and retrieving autobiographical memories, which are just memories of moments in our lives, is also engaged. And this simultaneous activation explains why a single track can transport us back to a specific moment in our past with feelings that feel immediate, raw, and sometimes just overwhelming. And even the nucleus accumbens, which is associated with pleasure and reward, can also be triggered, which explains why music can both be painfully emotional and irresistibly compelling at the same time. So I often refer to the phenomenon known as the reminiscence bump, which is a period roughly between ages 10 and 30, where we form our most vivid and emotionally charged memories. And this is a time where many formative experiences occur. You've got first loves, intense friendships, personal losses, and moments of self-discovery. And songs from this period, they tend to carry a particularly strong emotional weight, which is why hearing them decades later can evoke a surge of feelings, often stronger than more recent experiences. The music becomes literally inseparable from the personal and social context in which it was first experienced. And in some cases, songs act like something called flashbulb memories, which is a term that psychologists use to describe highly vivid, emotionally charged recollections that feel as if we're reliving the moment. So just as people can recall exactly where they were during major global events like 9/11 or the fall of the Berlin Wall, a song associated with personal high stakes can instantly transport us back. Unlike ordinary memory recall, flashbulb memories often engage multiple senses and physiological responses all at the same time, making the experience of actually flashing back to that moment feel immediate, immersive, and overwhelming. Now, another mechanism at play here is classical conditioning, which was famously described by Pavlov. So, if a song plays during a highly emotional event, over time, the song itself becomes linked to that emotional state. For example, a breakup song repeatedly heard while processing heartbreak can make casual listening feel painfully evocative. And similarly, a song that was played at a funeral or even a hospital can become inseparably tied to grief or loss. And even previously enjoyable neutral songs can also become emotionally charged, purely because of the context in which they were experienced. And this explains why a song heard years later in a completely unrelated setting can suddenly elicit a strong emotional response. The brain has learned to associate the melody, harmony, or lyrics with a specific memory, creating this kind of emotional shortcut that bypasses conscious control. Music cues also operate similarly to scent, triggering memory recall in ways sometimes called the Proust effect. Now, this was named after Marcel Proust's description of how the smell of a Madeleine cake instantly brought childhood memories back. So, a few bars of a song, a lyric, or even a specific chord progression can act as a cue, instantly transporting us back in time to the emotional landscape of a memory. And neuroscientific studies confirm this. Music cues can reactivate the same neural networks engaged during the original experience, including sensory, emotional, and motor areas. And this is why a song can make you feel like you're back in that moment, even if your conscious mind knows that you're safe in the present. Honestly, the potency of music as a cue is remarkable. Research has shown that even subtle changes in music can dramatically alter emotional responses. So, for instance, one study found that participants listening to music with strong personal associations showed significantly higher physiological responses, so changes in heart rate, skin conductance, and even facial expressions. And this was in comparison to those listening to unfamiliar music. And this underscores music's unique ability to bridge memory and emotion in ways that other stimuli, like photos or objects, honestly rarely do. And the immediacy and intensity of these cues help explain why trigger songs often feel unavoidable. The first few notes of a track can suddenly transport you to another room, another time, re-experiencing emotions exactly as they were felt before. So unlike photographs, objects, or actually even some scents, music bypasses many of our conscious defenses, striking directly at the heart of our emotional memory. It's immersive, inescapable, and honestly at times just painful. Yet it's also strangely compelling, drawing us in even when we know that the song may hurt. Now, trigger songs aren't just an abstract concept in psychology. They happen to all of us in real life, shaping our emotional experiences in both subtle and profound ways. So, one of the most common examples, I think, comes from romantic heartbreak. Think of a song that you and an ex loved, or maybe one that was playing during the moment that your relationship ended. Maybe you replayed it over and over again to help you process. But after the breakup, hearing a few bars of that track can just feel unbearable. And psychologists suggest that this is because the song has become emotionally conditioned. It's no longer just a song, but a cue for the emotions, memories, and identity disruptions linked to that relationship. Now, music psychologists have also studied this phenomenon extensively. Research shows that songs associated with intense personal experiences elicit stronger emotional and physiological responses than neutral music. Now, this makes sense, right? Participants in studies have reported goosebumps, tears, or rapid heartbeat when listening to music tied to personal memories, even when the memories are years old. And like I said, this is because music engages not only memory and emotion in the brain, but also reward systems, which explains why a breakup song can feel almost physically painful yet compelling at the same time. Music also plays a profound role in grief and loss. Certain tracks become inseparable for funerals, hospital visits, or just moments of mourning. So, for instance, Elton John's Candle in the Wind, it actually became a collective trigger after Princess Diana's death, evoking grief for millions who associated it with loss, remembrance, and national mourning. But on a personal level, a song played at a loved one's funeral or in a hospital room may forever carry the weight of that grief, resurfacing tears or heartache whenever it's heard again. Now, music therapists have found that songs used in bereavement contexts can actually intensify emotions precisely because they engage both personal memory and shared social experience. And this duality can make music both healing, so helping us process and articulate grief, but also painful, reopening emotional wounds when we're reminded of what we lost. But interestingly, even joyful songs can become painful if they're tied to someone that you've lost or even a life that's changed. A track that once marked happiness. So, for example, a favorite dance song from youth, a wedding song, or a celebratory anthem. It can suddenly trigger sadness or longing when the context shifts. And the phenomenon is related to what researchers call context-dependent memory. And this is where a stimulus becomes associated not just with an event, but with the environment, emotions, and people present at the time. So when the context changes, so for instance, when the person is no longer present or the life stage has passed, the song can evoke a kind of cognitive dissonance. You've got this bittersweet mix of pleasure and pain, nostalgia and grief. And I want to touch a little bit more on this later in the episode as well. A few of you opened up to me about your own experiences with trigger songs, and this really stood out in a lot of the responses. So we'll dig into those a little bit later as well. But this duality, it underscores a key insight from music psych. Music is less about the notes themselves and more about the contextual and emotional associations that we attach to them. A single song can simultaneously evoke love, loss, nostalgia, longing, and identity. It can remind us of who we were, who we loved, and who we've become. And this creates this rich, complex, and sometimes painful emotional map that is deeply personal yet universally recognizable. Everyone honestly has a song that transports them, for better or for worse, and in that way, trigger songs reveal music's extraordinary power to heal, to harm as well, and to mirror the full spectrum of human experience. Now, let's talk a bit about why trigger songs can hurt so much in the moment. Trigger songs can feel unavoidable, almost as if the brain forces us to relive the associated memories and emotions, whether we want to or not. And this is largely due to something called involuntary recall. So unlike deliberately thinking about a memory, a song can automatically bring it to the surface without any conscious effort. And neuroscientists suggest that music has privileged access to the brain's memory and emotion circuits. When a trigger song plays, we know that it's lighting up different areas of the brain all at once. But this simultaneous activation of the different brain regions can actually bypass our conscious control, making it feel as though the song forces the memory upon us in that moment. And research in cognitive psychology shows that music can trigger these involuntary recollections more effectively than visual or textual cues, in part because it engages multiple senses: auditory, emotional, and sometimes even motor responses if the song prompts movement or dance. And another reason that trigger songs can be so intense is amplified emotion. Music doesn't just bring back a memory, it often intensifies the feelings associated with it. So, studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, have shown that listening to emotionally charged music activates a network of brain areas, including the prefrontal cortex, insula, and ventral striatum, which collectively enhance emotional processing and reward. And this is why a song linked to heartbreak can make your chest ache, your throat tighten, or even bring tears to your eyes. The emotional impact is amplified beyond what the memory alone would elicit. So music acts as this emotional magnifier, connecting memory and emotional effect in a way that few other stimuli can. A third factor here is identity and attachment. So music is deeply intertwined with our sense of self. Psychologists have found that songs from formative periods of life, like I mentioned, can become a part of our personal narrative, a soundtrack to who we were, who we loved, and who we hope to become. And when a trigger song brings up memories of someone we've lost or a version of ourselves that we no longer identify with, it can feel like a double impact, mourning the person or experience and mourning a piece of our own identity. And research in developmental and social psychology actually shows that musical preferences and associations often act as markers of identity and social belonging. So losing the context in which a song was meaningful, whether that's through a breakup, death, or life transition, can make listening feel emotionally destabilizing because the song evokes both the memory and the version of ourselves that are tied to it. Honestly, this is a really interesting one because grief takes so many different forms. It's not just related to death of a person. It's also related to you losing a part of yourself in whatever that way may be, whether that was losing a friendship, losing a relationship, physically losing a person, losing a job, moving out of an apartment that you loved. Different things like this, they all evoke feelings of grief. And those are things that are highly sensitive. And the memories and emotions that we tie to these large life transitions, they stick with us for life and are brought back through stimuli like music. So I think while some people have never been through grief in the sense of losing a person, there are many ways that we experience grief, and our trigger songs are linked to all of those different life events. So yeah, a really interesting one to reflect on when we think about what our trigger songs are linked to. Now, trigger songs can also interact with mood congruent memory, which is a well-documented phenomenon in which we're more likely to recall memories that match our current emotional state. So this means that if we're already feeling sad or anxious, hearing a song tied to a painful event can actually intensify the emotional response, while a joyful song might feel bittersweet or even hollow if it contrasts with our current mood. Music's ability to create this emotional feedback loop really explains why certain songs can sometimes trap us in a moment of pain or nostalgia, really making it difficult to separate the song from the emotion that it evokes. So, in short, trigger songs hurt because they operate on multiple levels at once. They involuntarily pull up vivid memories, amplify emotional responses, and touch the very core of who we are and who we were. They're not just reminders of the past. They're immersive experiences that blend memory, emotion, and identity in ways that are uniquely powerful and sometimes painfully unavoidable. Now, this is the part of the episode where we talk about you. So, when I asked over on Threads if you had ever had a song that you couldn't listen to anymore because of the memories attached, the stories poured in. Some of you spoke of pain, others of resilience, and many touched on this complicated middle ground in between. So I really want to dedicate some time to talking about those responses that you so vulnerably gave to me. And yeah, let's just put the spotlight on your stories. So for some, a single song became inseparable from trauma. One person shared, I couldn't listen to Radio Gaga by Queen because it took me right back to an assault in my late teens. I had EDMR treatment where I relived the trauma and eventually packed it away. I can hear it now and not even a flicker. Thank you so much for sharing that super vulnerable experience, and I'm so sorry that you went through this. This is a clear example of how therapy can help restructure emotional memory. So therapy really gave them a way to reclaim a song that once felt unbearable. Techniques like EMDR, which by the way stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, it's a trauma-focused psychotherapy that basically helps individuals process these distressing memories and replacing them with more positive ones. But techniques like this and also trauma-focused CBT really allow the brain to reprocess the event and the song associated with it, weakening its automatic emotional charge and enabling the listener to reclaim it. Others described how music can become tangled with relationships, both the beauty of them and their pain. So one person wrote that they separated from their husband in 1987 and he bought her Always on My Mind by the Pet Shop Boys. And she said that she can't listen to it without thinking of him. Another person said, I don't know if I can ever listen to any of the songs used in my wedding. They're painful now since we're divorced. And for others, whole artists became reminders of people that they'd rather forget. So someone said, I had to avoid whole artists attached to songs that I once played for them until it didn't hurt. And psychology explains this through classical conditioning. So the song itself becomes a cue for the emotions experienced during the relationship. So even neutral music can evoke these powerful responses when they're tied to those personal experiences. Now, as we've discussed throughout the episode, grief often leaves its imprint on music and is one of the most potent forms, I would say, of trigger songs. So a chorus member described performing on my own during a competition. They said that our director died last November, and now when I hear it, I can only picture her mouthing, wow, when we started singing it, and I burst into tears. Maybe someday I'll be able to listen to it again. And that really shows also where you're at in your grief and healing journey right now. I hope that one day you are able to listen to it again with a positive memory, remembering it in honor of the director that you lost. Another person shared, I have a hard time listening to Alanis's Pretty Little Folks album. I was listening to it for the first time on the day that would be the last time I talked to my dad on the phone. I'll eventually reclaim it in time. And these examples really demonstrate involuntary recall here, which is a hallmark of trigger songs. The brain automatically links music to memories, making the emotional response feel immediate and unavoidable. But like I said, I hope that in time, you're able to detach the music from the memory itself and be able to enjoy that music, especially if you still want to. And that's a theme that comes up very often as well, of really still wanting to enjoy that music, but physically not being able to. But that doesn't mean that you'll never reach that point. But sometimes it isn't just one song, but it's a whole band or an entire artist that carries too much weight. So someone said, I listened to one particular band a lot when I was depressed. Now their songs remind me of a time I want to forget, and I've removed the entire band from my playlist. And someone else echoed something which I think really hits hard. They said, this is the same for me. I remember telling my mum after an attempt that if she noticed me listening to them again, she should check on me. I'm not interested in trying to change that. Their music is too dark for me. Now, avoidance like this can be adaptive in the short term, helping people regulate intense emotions. But research in CBT actually shows that avoidance, when it's prolonged, can actually help maintain the emotional charge of the trigger, preventing the brain from forming newer, safer associations. But at the same time, I want to note that growth can also look like leaving certain music behind altogether. Outgrowing an artist or a band, it doesn't have to be a loss. It can be a powerful marker of change, showing that you've moved past a chapter of life that no longer feels good to revisit. Nothing obliges you to fall back into music that drags you somewhere that you don't want to go. And if that's something that you can recognize, I think that that's such a powerful growth marker as well. But avoidance isn't the only story. Many spoke about the active, sometimes defiant choice to reclaim the songs that once brought them pain. So one person wrote, I had to reclaim an entire band after I left my abuser. I loved this band long before I met him, and he wasn't going to take that from me. Another put it simply, if I like the song, I'm definitely going to make the effort to reclaim it. I'm not about to let someone rob me of music that I love and is a part of me. And others see reclamation as a process. The songs evolve for me over time. Eventually, the memories, good or bad, that they're connected to just become a story to share. If I ever skip songs, it's because I genuinely dislike them, not just because they take me back to a moment in time. And this reflects the psychological principle of memory reconsolidation. By intentionally pairing a song with new positive experiences, listeners can reshape its emotional meaning, gradually weakening those negative associations. And I think it's such a powerful process of reclaiming those songs back as your own, taking it away from the trauma, from the hurt, especially when someone caused that for you. I think that's such a power move. For some, time itself was the greatest healer. So one person explained that this has happened with a few songs tied to failed relationships, and each one probably took 5 to 10 years of not hearing them until one day I realized the reaction was gone. And that was the best realization. I love that. That's amazing. Sometimes you do just need time to pass in order to be able to reclaim them. Another person said, after 10 years, I was okay with them, broken away from any emotional response, just an acknowledgement. And these stories show how the brain's emotional associations aren't fixed. With time and repeated exposure, or even just the natural passage of time, really, songs can transition from painful triggers to neutral or even comforting experiences. But other people tend to lean into the pain, almost using music like a mirror. Someone said, I power through and let the music take me where it will. Sometimes it's okay, other times, ugly cry. I think that's such a real part of human experience. Honestly, sometimes we don't even know how a song is going to hit us on a certain day. Sometimes those things just feel way out of our control. So sometimes it is just taking a leap and seeing how it feels for us in that moment. Another person admitted, interestingly, they said that they masochistically listen to them frequently. Don't know why, they seem to confirm my personal narrative. But honestly, all of this mirrors these kind of therapeutic exposure strategies where facing a trigger in a controlled way can allow the processing of unresolved emotions and, over time, reduce the distress. Also, just acknowledging the one person did, that the trigger songs, they're part of your journey. They represent what you've been through. And if you are able to reclaim those, I think that's such a powerful thing to be able to do and acknowledge that it's part of your narrative and part of your journey. And some stories captured both pain and defiance in a single moment. So one person wrote, "Say Hello" by April Wine absolutely beat the shit out of my heart the other day. Full on sobbing. But I'm listening to it right now for practice because he took enough. He's not getting this song. I love that. I hope that you manage to reclaim that and sit with yourself in a safe listening space and just remind yourself, hey, I love this song and it's mine, and I'm not going to let anyone take that from me. And if you're also not able to do that right now, that's completely okay as well. But together, these stories, they reveal this full spectrum of what it means to live with trigger songs. Avoidance, grief, reclamation, defiance, and eventually healing. They remind us that music's power lies not only in melody or lyrics, but in the deeply personal histories that we carry into every single listen. Now, if you did share your story with me, thank you so much for that vulnerability. It's so appreciated. We all have such unique experiences with music and the role that it plays in our personal story, and I'm always so touched to hear about your stories. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Now, trigger songs can feel overwhelming, but I want to finish off with some intentional strategies that we can use to navigate the emotional impact that they bring. Music has this unique ability to reach deep into memory and emotion, which makes coping with these songs delicate and powerful at the same time. And psychology and music therapy research offer several evidence-based approaches to help you as listeners manage your responses to these trigger songs. Now, as I've touched on while talking about some listener experiences, a natural response to a painful song is avoidance. Some people skip the track, remove it from playlists, or avoid certain albums entirely. Now, avoidance can provide short-term relief, particularly during these moments of acute grief, heartbreak, or emotional vulnerability, allowing us space to regulate our emotions without being overwhelmed. However, research in CBT suggests that complete avoidance may actually reinforce the emotional intensity associated with the trigger. And when a song is never revisited, the brain doesn't have the opportunity to update its associations, meaning that the emotional charge just remains. And this is where gradual exposure becomes useful. So gradual exposure, which is a technique rooted in CBT and trauma therapy, involves listening to the song in small, controlled doses, often paired with emotional reflection, like journaling or just mindful observation. And studies from music therapy actually indicate that intentional exposure can help desensitize emotional responses, allowing the listener to reclaim the song without feeling overwhelmed. Over time, exposure can help the brain form new associations, transforming the song from a source of distress into one of reflection or even empowerment. Another effective method is recontextualization, which involves creating new, positive associations with a previously triggering song. So, hearing the song in a supportive environment, during enjoyable activities, or even just in a calm and controlled setting, it can slowly help to reshape its emotional meaning. So, neuroscience research shows that new emotional experiences can form competing neural associations, reducing the intensity of old, painful memories. So, music therapists often encourage pairing previously distressing songs with positive experiences like dancing, exercising, or just listening in a safe environment to gradually reframe those emotional responses and just regain a sense of control over the music. Self-awareness is also a critical tool in managing trigger songs. So really recognizing your personal trigger playlist, allowing you to approach those songs with intention. So keeping track of which tracks might be causing distress and under what circumstances can really help you make deliberate choices about when and how to listen. Psychologists emphasize that mindful engagement with emotional triggers promotes emotional regulation, providing a sense of agency and control rather than leaving you at the mercy of the song. Now, working with trigger songs in a therapeutic context can be so healing. Music therapists use emotionally charged songs as tools for exploration, helping clients process grief, heartbreak, or trauma. So, different techniques here may include reflective listening, lyric analysis, or combining music with expressive writing or art. However, regular therapies, so CBT, grief counseling, or even trauma-focused therapy, can also be highly effective. A therapist can guide clients in exploring the emotions triggered by a song, understanding why certain memories might feel especially intense, and helping you to develop strategies to manage distress outside of music. So research shows that processing emotions through both music therapy and conventional therapy can reduce symptoms of anxiety, depression, and complicated grief, as a song becomes this safe space for emotions that might otherwise feel overwhelming. There are also practical strategies that can be applied outside of therapy. So, journaling while listening, for example, allows you to externalize thoughts, feelings, and memories as they arise, which research shows can reduce emotional intensity and improve mood regulation. Also, creating a healing playlist, so balancing difficult songs with uplifting or comforting music, can provide this kind of emotional equilibrium, preventing a single song from overwhelming you. And finally, pairing listening with grounding techniques such as deep breathing, body scanning, or just focusing on sensory cues really helps to manage strong emotional responses. So, trauma-informed research really emphasizes that grounding is essential when engaging with emotionally charged stimuli, as it prevents re-traumatization and also helps you maintain this sense of emotional stability. So, by combining self-awareness, gradual exposure, recontextualization, therapeutic support, and these practical coping tools, it's possible not only to manage the distress caused by trigger songs, but also to transform them into sources of reflection, healing, and insight. While music can hurt deeply, we all know that it can also help us process, integrate, and ultimately reclaim our emotional experiences, which I think is the most powerful part of it all, turning even the most painful tracks into opportunities for growth and emotional understanding. But that brings us to the end of today's episode. This was a heavy one, but I hope some of what's been said today resonates with you and you walk away with more mindfulness around your experiences. And most importantly, know that you're not alone. No one can tell you how to heal or what to listen to. So always just listen to yourself and your emotions. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Sound Mind. If you have enjoyed this episode, please rate or review on wherever you're listening and share it with someone who loves music just as much as you do, or might need this episode a little bit more right now. Don't forget to follow us and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Also, come and say hi over on Instagram or on Threads at The Sound Mind Talks. That's where I got all of your amazing stories for today's episode, and I just love having these vulnerable and open discussions with you. So if you'd like to be a part of that, come and join us over there. But until next time, keep listening, keep reflecting, and I'll see you on The Sound Mind.